Alright, good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, everybody. Those of you on Facebook and YouTube. Appreciate you guys joining. Kind of getting a little bit of a later start than I wanted to. I apologize, I had some Wi-Fi issues. So, yeah, apparently, if your Wi-Fi is not plugged in, it doesn't work. My bad. Anyways, there's a whole story behind why it wasn't plugged in. Don't judge me. Yeah, we're gonna learn that tonight, sort of. I think it might be chapter 2. I don't remember. But anyways, so starting out again, like I said, welcome to the video. Primarily, just gonna go through and excuse me, I pre-read the chapter. Actually, to be honest with you, I think I'm on chapter 4 right now. About to start chapter 5. So I made notes, just different things that kind of jumped out at me as I was reading through. This is more because there is a lot to this book, and I will be honest with you, I am not a perfect theologian, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that I know everything about everything that there is to do with the Bible. So with that being said, I just kind of did this, almost kind of wanted to do this as more devotional than anything else, not really jump into main points and what is Paul's point that he's getting across, but more just reading through and just kind of just stuff that jumped out at me, stuff that I thought was interesting, something that I kind of thought was more of a way of summing things up, and in all honesty, I may end up explaining some things or talking about something for an extended period of time. I'm not really sure. I know I go back and forth. And yeah, by the way, my phone is over on this side of me, and my computer is on directly in front of me. So when y'all see me look back and forth, it's because they're not side by side. All right. Just if you want like the eye contact throughout the whole thing, you just have to go back and forth between the Facebook Live and the YouTube video when I post the YouTube video. If you're watching on YouTube, just go watch Facebook Live and just it's back and forth and back and forth. All right. But anyways, so like I said before, if you guys have something that kind of jumped out at you, or you guys hear something that kind of makes you think about something else, or you see something that I may not have seen, like, please, by all means, throw it out there, throw it in the comments. You shoot me a message, we can talk about it. You give me a phone call. I make no promises that I'll answer because of my job. We've been doing a lot of overtime lately, which is nice. But with that being said, there was something else I was going to say, and I don't remember what. But anyways, alright, so go ahead and get started with this. Alright, so like I said, Romans chapter 1. Let me adjust my phone. If you're in the YouTube video and you just kind of lost me for a second, my bad. I didn't realize my phone slipped. And it's gonna slip again. Temporary pause. Okay, there we go. All right. And if you're watching on the YouTube video, yes, you can see I got my Bible, my notes, so you guys can verify that I have everything I said. But anyways, now that we're just 4 minutes into the video. All right. So if you're just now joining us, we're actually going to start now. So. Starting out, and just for y'all's simplicity purposes, I guess, I use an ESV Bible. A lot of times when I'm reading through stuff and I'm looking at it, sorry, I just had notifications pop up on Facebook that I didn't know what to do. Anyways, but yeah, for y'all's simplicity, I use ESV. When I'm reading through, I don't necessarily always use it, and I'll kind of quote back and forth from time to time. But primarily, when I do the initial read-through, when I do everything, it is all going to be ESV version. So, with that being said, 5 minutes into the video, now we're going to start. Alright, so chapter 1 says, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand through his prophets and the Holy Scriptures, concerning his Son, who was descendant from David according to the flesh, and was declared to be the Son of God in power according to the Spirit of holiness by his resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord, through whom we received grace and apostleship to bring about the obedience of faith for the sake of his name among all the nations, including you who are called to belong to Jesus Christ. To all those in Rome who are loved by God and called to be saints, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Whew. I thought it was a tongue twister reading it the first time. But anyways, okay, so this is basically just Paul is just opening this letter up, all right? Just saying, hey, how you doing, so to speak. So the dates around this time is going on around AD 57 for those of you who know the dates, but the letter is actually written at the same time of what's been going on in Acts chapter 20 and what's been led up to. So yeah, that's the time frame. All right, so if you are familiar with Acts, that was right after Jesus had died on the cross and had raised again, ascended into heaven, and then you see all of the disciples going out and preaching and teaching. And as all of this is happening, then you've got, Paul comes into the picture, and he references a couple times his past and where he came from and who he was before. And what set up his apostleship and whatnot. And for those of you who are not familiar with the story, I don't give spoilers. Sorry. So with that being said, go read Acts, and you'll find out the story. But what's going on is you see all these sermons that are going on. You see the discipleship that's taking place, and the message of Jesus is being spread throughout all the land. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. I forget who went to Rome. I'll have to look that up and find it. And it may not specify or may not be very specific about who was where and what was going on. But that's what's going on all at this time. At the time that Paul is writing this letter, is everything is growing, and the start of the church is being started. Not necessarily what we would consider church today as the building, but the church as in the body of believers. I just lost my train of thought. The body of believers and the bride of Christ, the church as a whole, not just individual buildings and locations and whatnot, but it's actually the entirety of all Christians, all of those who believe that Jesus was the Son of God, was buried and raised from the dead. That's what's all going on around this time, and Paul is going to go on to talk about how he wants to go to Rome. And a lot of times what you see in Paul's letters and what you see is he's writing and almost like criticizing the church that he's writing to, or he's heard some things that made him stop and think, and so he's sending this letter basically calling them out on their sin. We see that in Corinthians. We see that throughout the New Testament when Paul is writing, he's talking about, hey, look, y'all need to stop this. It's not right. And what we see here in Romans is, for the most part, he's really just writing a letter to encourage people. Not only is he trying to encourage people, but he is also trying to teach and disciple them and pour out knowledge. Again, with the timeline that's what they're doing, is they're teaching more than anything else. It really does make sense in making the gears turn. So he opens up this letter. One of the things that I really I noticed from the opening was that he calls the church, the Roman church, said that they're called to be saints. So like I just thought that was interesting, and he points out that that they're loved by God and they're called to be saints. So like I don't know why I thought that was weird. I guess it's kind of because Paul doesn't Paul wrote a lot of letters criticizing churches and telling them like, hey, look, you're doing really well when I left, but right now you're not, and So also another interesting thing. So if you look, I don't know why I just thought about this, but I did. But if you look, so the very next book of the Bible after Romans is 1 Corinthians. All right, so at the time that Paul writes this letter, what is the most common thought and line is he's right now in Corinth, starting the church in Corinth. So like he's writing to the Romans while he's starting the church in Corinth, and then as soon as he finishes writing the letter in Romans, then you have the letter in Corinth. I just thought that was cool. That's just me. Sorry. Anyways, all right. Moving on. There are a lot of like rabbit holes that we're gonna go down that are 100% my fault. Just saying. All right. So, verse 8. All right. So first I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed in all the world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the claim. Whom I serve with my spirit claimed in all the world. For God is my witness. Yeah. All right. Let me just try this all over again. I can't read apparently. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed in all the world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I mention you always in my prayers, asking that somehow by God's will I may now at last succeed in coming to you. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gifts to strengthen you. That is, that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that I have often intended to come to you, but thus far have been prevented, in order that I may reap some harvest among you as well as among the rest of the Gentiles. I am under obligation both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to wise and to the foolish. So I am eager to preach the gospel to you also who are in Rome. Ugh. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. My fault. So first of all, what we see here is Paul is really like praising them, and it's like a sense of pride in the church, at what's going on and what he's hearing about the Roman church and what's going on there. And then Paul talks about how he wants to go to Rome, both to encourage and to be encouraged. All right, so he's eager to preach there and meet with them. So I think the reason why Paul is looking to go to Rome at this point, I would honestly think that maybe it is early in the church, it's early in the ministry, it's early in Paul's life as a Christian and everything there. So I've actually been wondering and questioning myself, like, does Paul want to go to Rome? Alright. I might lose the Facebook Live in just a second, I'm not gonna lie. But I've been wondering, if Paul wants to go to Rome as more of a just like to encourage and be encouraged himself, and to grow his own faith more. Not that he had doubts, or not that he was struggling in any particular way, but how it's nice to it's nice to go to church on Sunday mornings because you can be encouraged by the other people there. I've been wondering, like, is it a similar concept. Like, he's been out teaching and starting church after church after church, and he's been teaching and starting, that maybe he wants to go somewhere where he's not starting a church, or he's not teaching, where he's just simply just going and just growing and just having those theological discussions, or having the conversations that you don't necessarily get to have with new young believers, that maybe he wants to be able to talk about. Or I know in the first couple of chapters, I know just finishing up chapter 4, and what we're fixing to start getting into is he's talking a lot about righteousness and unrighteousness, and the law versus grace, and what is the new covenant, and what is the law's role in the new covenant, and different aspects of everything that's just going on in the early church and the new church. And I wonder if he talks about that because that's where he's at, what he's learned, what he has recently learned, he's sharing with them. He's learning about righteousness. There are several points, I believe it's in chapter 2. Yeah, chapter 2 and chapter 3 as well, where he quotes the Old Testament, and he talks about the life of Abraham, and he talks about, David and what all David was going through when he wrote different psalms. And he talks about that, and I wonder if that's because he was mature in his faith, but also still young in his faith. And so he wanted to ultimately go to Rome to be encouraged and to grow more in not necessarily not necessarily maturity, but just kind of like just grow in what he knows and what he already knows, and maybe even learn new things. I feel like that if Paul were in Rome and he were preaching this message here, he was spending time with them as opposed to writing them a letter, he probably would have been able to grow his ministry, and he would have been able to grow himself as a Christian. You can't really grow by yourself, and if you have a whole church of people pouring into you, fellowshipping with you, teaching you, sharing different thoughts and aspects of what they have learned, if you have all of that at one time, you can't help but grow from that. You can't help but walk away different, changed, and I guess more mature, or with more wisdom. So honestly and truly, and even talking about it right now, even though I'm not having anybody else support, I am very inclined to think that is why Paul says that, he wanted to go to be encouraged and to encourage, because the way that he looked at some things, the Romans may not have, and the way the Romans looked at some things, he may not have. Just different things like that. And it also says that he's eager to preach to Rome. And I think that's because, in very similar to the way of these videos is, I've been really excited about starting these back. I was going to start last night, and then I was like, you know what? Let me start on the 1st. And all day, like today at work, time almost slowed down. I was like, man, I'm ready to go. But I was eager to do this because I learn a lot during these videos, and I felt like it was a very similar concept for Paul. He was eager to preach because he knew that if he were preaching, then it was going to cause people to ask him questions, and if people started asking him questions, then he was going to get knowledge, and if he didn't know the answer but somebody else did, then they could pour that knowledge into him, and he could grow more and more and more and more and more, and he could just keep going up. He starts out right here, and he just keeps building and building on what he already knows. You've got your solid foundation where you build your house, and then you just kind of add on to that, and you add on to that, and you add your walls and your roof, and you just keep going up. And I think it's the exact same with our spiritual life, and I think that's what Paul is really referring to here is, he wants to go and build his spiritual life. He wants to go and grow his faith. He wants to have that firm foundation. If you're on the YouTube video, you get to see all my hand motions. If you're on Facebook, probably not. But, you get to see, you just build, and the more that you're building and the more you add on, that foundation is always there, and the more you add on, the more you grow. And as we grow and as we learn more, that takes away some of the things that, we looked at in the initial foundation right after, some of the things that we thought, as we grow and as we learn, we might learn that, hey, this wasn't exactly right. So, we throw it out and we rebuild. And as we're building up and as we're going up in our faith, we're throwing out the things that are not of God, or that are not true, or that aren't right. We have this foundation and we build on it, and then we break it down, and we build it back up and we break it down. Because, our walk with Christ and our study, everything it's constantly changing, because not only are we growing every day, but we're learning more every day. And the more you learn, the more you grow. And the more you grow, the more you realize, hey, what I thought 2 weeks ago, that wasn't right. I know a lot of times in my own personal life, I look at one situation, and the way I looked at a situation, how I would have handled it, 3-4 years ago, it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't necessarily correct, or it wasn't right. I'm 22 years old now. If I look back to just, back when I was 18, the way I would have handled some of the situations that I've been faced with this year alone, I would have handled them completely different. Now, not to say that I was wrong before, but I wasn't right. And it's the same way in our faith. And I think that's something that Paul learned was, just because, I'm right doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't make me wrong, but it doesn't make me right. That concept and that mentality is something that I think Paul really had, especially early on in his ministry, in growing and trying to make sure that he's saying the right things. And as he grows, he learns more. And then the more he grows, the more he grows. And the more he grows, he grows deeper in that relationship with God. It gets closer and closer and closer and closer. And then he learns something more that brings him even closer. And so ultimately, I think that's what this whole section about wanting to go to Rome and why he wants to go to Rome so bad is not necessarily because I think he did have a desire to go to Rome, but I think it also had a lot to do with the fact that he knew he was going to grow more if he could go to Rome in that time. So, and there goes alright, so if you're when watching on the YouTube, give me just a second. I just lost my whole Facebook thing. It all went down. Okay, go. Reload. Is it gonna work? It ended. Okay. Well, did it post is, I think, the real question here. Let me see here. Yep, sorry about this, guys. It happens, I guess. I don't know. Something weird's been going on with my Wi-Fi, so I gotta call these people and tell them what's going on and see if they can send somebody out here to fix it. Trying to get this live stream set back up. And I think it's live and back on. We're about to find out. It's loading. There it goes. Alright, cool. Alright, so my Facebook people, sorry about that. YouTube people, sorry. I might just cut this whole thing out of Facebook, or out of YouTube. I'm not gonna lie. Sorry about that. Alright, so try this again. So we're going to move on. So all that to cover, we got the first section covered in the first video, and now we're going to cover the second half. So it's like a two-part video. It's like a to be continued, right? Okay, so you don't have time to watch the first half. Y'all know what I mean. Anyways, moving on. All right, so verse 16 is where I'm at. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes it, to the Jew first and also the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness, unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world. In the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up in their lusts of their heart to impurities, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served creatures rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. So ultimately here, like, we see Paul immediately, he's starting to get into the righteous versus the unrighteous, okay? So he's excuse me. Sorry, I'm reading my notes here. Give me a second here. So basically what we see is that God sees everything, like, no matter what has happened, no matter what we're doing, no matter what we have going on, God sees, and he sees the righteous and he sees the unrighteous. Now, Paul does get into this a little bit. I believe it's in chapter 2, it might be chapter 3. But Paul kind of gets into it a little bit, and he talks about how, there's grace, which is why it goes into talking about the law, but why we're no longer bound to the law is because now grace is here, and we have grace. So, God forgives, but at the same time, the people who turn away, which is what he's talking about, very commonly quoted verse is Romans 1:22, claiming to be wise, they became fools. So a lot of times what we see is, these people who are very, very intelligent, very knowledgeable, if they're living an unrighteous lifestyle, then ultimately, like, they are not as intelligent. They are not honoring God, and they're not putting God first. And so even as smart as they are, they're still fools. They're still foolish. And Paul talks about how, God gave them up. All right, so that's in verses 24 and 25. He starts to talk about how God gave them up in the lust of their heart to impurity. So this isn't like when we just give up on a task because we can't do it. If you haven't used the gym as an example, if you've never worked out and you decide to go in and you're gonna bench press 300 pounds, well, you're not gonna be able to do it, and two, you give up. You can't do it. You can work towards it to get that goal, but you give up and you walk away and you don't try. Or like the people who use the gym again, people who start going to the gym and then they just give up. That's not what Paul is talking about here when he says that God gave them up. So this is more, from what I'm understanding, this is more where Paul talks about free will. And so God, when it says God gave them up, he's talking about he gave them up to what we want and what we choose, in the sense of our free will. God gave us free will, and he gave us the right to choose, and that's what Paul ultimately means when he says he gave them up. So, in another example is like, you don't give up on your kid, but, sometimes you just walk out of a room and say, yeah, I give up. I do that with, I have two nieces. All right, one of them is just turned 2, and one of them's about to be 3. I think. She's about to be 3 or she just turned 3, one of the two. Well, there have been numerous times where I have been arguing with a 2-year-old, and I was like, you know what? No, I give up. Just do it. I don't care. It's not that I've legitimately given up on this child. It's that I was like, you know what? Not worth it. You can make your own choice. Do what you do. Do your own thing. And wasn't good or bad. In this situation, like it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but in relation to the text, it is bad in the sense of God allows us to choose sin, and we do. We choose sin more often than we choose God, which takes us into verse 26. It says, "For this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up their natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them." All right, so Paul lists out a whole bunch of sins that God gave us the freedom to choose. And I know that a lot of people are not going to like what I'm about to talk about. But in verses 26 and 27, Paul is referring to homosexuality. And I know it's a big topic right now. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Homosexuality is a sin. And I know a lot of people throw out there the whole, well, if I'm, if I was born gay, or, if God didn't want me to be gay, then, guys, that's not God. That's the devil, and that's a choice. Everything that I just read off, and I'll read them again in just a second, but everything I just read is all from Satan, and it's all because we choose it. I'm just going to throw that out there now. All right, so I'm going to move on. I'm not going to go any deeper into this. I am not going to touch on the subject for a while. But anyways, so moving on in verse 28, so because they didn't see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done. So it says that they're filled with all manners. He kind of breaks this down and almost puts the different sins into different categories, right? So he says they're filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, and malice. All right, and then he goes on to say that they're gossips, and really, if we break it down, a lot of these sins, we, even as Christians, we still commit this. I mean, how often are we faithless? I mean, been several times in my life where I had absolutely no faith of anything that was about to happen. Like it wasn't like I just didn't trust God to get me through it. It was 110%. Like I just, at that point in time, I was in a position where I was like, I don't have a whole lot of faith right now. Which, when we realize it, usually after the fact, that's when we can take time, we can say that prayer, we can, if you're able to, get into the Word, any number of things. But I mean, we've all been gossips at some point. We've all been boastful of ourselves. I would wager a really good argument that everybody has been disobedient to their parents. and the heartless and ruthlessness, like a lot of times we can be very heartless with other people. We may not have patience. If you don't have patience for somebody and you're just done with that person, I mean that's basically just being heartless. I mean, so there's a whole lot here that we are, even as Christians, that we are guilty of, and which is also why I think that Paul kind of breaks it down into unrighteousness, evil, covetous, and malice. So I think that the reason why he puts those first and then starts a new sentence to list things out is because there are some things that we are all going to be guilty of no matter what, and that is our flesh nature. That is because we are not perfect. I personally believe that we can reach a state of perfection because we are filled with the power of Jesus. And if Jesus was born a man and he was a human and he lived a perfect life, then what's to stop us from doing the same thing? Now, our entire lives, no, we cannot. I don't think that you can, but I think you can reach a state of such spiritual high that you actually physically see the sin and you choose to avoid it, and you choose to walk the other direction. Not anything to do with your power, but it's simply like you're so filled with the presence of God that's you're able to see it all. And then moving down in verse 32, so the people know that they're doing this stuff, and the people who do it, they deserve to die. All of these sins, all these people committing these sins, they all deserve to die. And if you do it, then you give your approval that it's okay if you do this. Whatever you do, like if you commit a sin, then you're basically saying, well, let me rephrase that. If you're living a lifestyle of any of the things that Paul lists here, then you ultimately, one, deserve to die, and you give your approval. You say, nope, it's okay if you do this, it's fine, I don't care. And in some situations you might be okay with that, but I mean, if I look at my own life and I look at some of the areas where I've failed and where I've struggled with this and where I've fallen down, and I stop and think, I'm like, I'm not okay with that. And it kind of gives us something to think about. Yeah. So, but yeah, that is the end of chapter 1 there. And with that being said, that is something that if you're watching this video, maybe it's the rest of the day, maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's whenever, but whenever you're watching this, and if you're watching it live, that's my challenge for you is tomorrow, look at every action you take, good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. Look at your actions and ask yourself, am I okay with somebody else doing this? Whether it's around you, to you, or anything like that. Stop and look. And if you wouldn't want, if you, I guess the stereotypical, if you want your kids to do it, then you shouldn't do it. Take kind of that mentality. And so that's what I'm going to challenge you guys with. And what I would encourage you guys to look at and go back through this list and actually read it and sit down and look up. If you don't know what some of these are, look it up, figure out what this stuff actually means. But yeah, so that is the end of my video. Again, if you guys have anything you want to add, whether it's private or public, feel free to comment or shoot me a message, shoot me a text message, an email. It doesn't matter. But give me, just kind of think through some of this stuff and let me know what you guys think about this. And if you guys like the videos, please share these videos. Whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on Facebook, either way, share the videos. Tell people about the page, whether, again, YouTube or Facebook, either way. And, if you guys want to be able to keep up and you can't necessarily watch on Facebook Live every night, then please like the YouTube page. It's literally just a daily work. You'll see the videos. This will be the second video I've posted up on the YouTube page. So, and if you're watching this and you're just watching it on YouTube, turn my attention over here. But if you're just watching this on YouTube and you like the videos and you want to see more and you want to hear more, again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and please, don't hesitate to comment things on there. If you have a Facebook and you want to try and get, information, or you want to add something but you don't necessarily want to share it publicly, let me know. And again, if you guys have any type of prayer needs, prayer requests, feel free to comment them or reach out to me personally, individually, anything like that. And I will definitely be lifting you guys up in prayer. And I will never, ever, 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 ever publicly call you guys out. All right, so if you send me something that you need prayer for, don't feel like you're going to be on my next video, because I would never do that. I may, I guess kind of share a little bit about your situation. I'm not going to give specific details, but say you just had a death in your family. I may share, hey, you guys be praying for a friend of mine that reached out. They had a death in their family. So I'm not going to call you guys out. I'm not going to publicly shame you. I don't do that at all for any reason. So you guys let me know, and I'll see y'all tomorrow night. Have a good one.